And now we will be having a joint public hearing with SAM. I really welcome here the SAM Committee on Chemical Submission. And this hearing is aimed to shed light on the widespread phenomenon of chemical submission of a science that extends beyond bars and on nightclubs and can occur in various social settings, including within family and friends. So I welcome everyone, and it is definitely my privilege to open today's hearing on this very important topic of chemical submission, also known as drug-facilitated sexual assault, a hidden but ever-present threat across Europe and the world. As I say, I welcome the SAN Committee and his Vice Chair, Madame Tilly Metz, as well as all the SAN's colleagues, as the topic of the hearing is not just a women's rights issue, but a public health that concern all us. While chemical submission, as I say, is normally associated, or was in the past normally associated with bars, nightclubs, now it has tended this space that we know very well for the Polycott case. And it could occur also in private homes, social gathering, and even in families, friendship, and professional circles. Given the importance of this issue, this hearing provides a better platform for us to assess the scope of the problem, examine existing responses with experts and stakeholders, and explore ways to strengthen prevention, protection, and prosecution efforts. This hearing gives all of us the opportunity to speak up about chemical submission while making the first step towards stronger and more coordinated response that probably is what we need. We have a distinguished panel of experts today who will share their insights on this pressing issue. And I would like to welcome Professor André Silczuk, who joins us remotely from Warsaw. He's representing the SEDEX DPL Foundation and Medical University of Warsaw. We have also Dr. Leila Chaouachi, sorry about the pronunciation. I should study each morning the fact that I don't, so sorry about this. It is a pharmacist and at the Paris Addictovigilance Center, founder of the Reference Center of Substance Facilitated Assault. Then we should have Madame Isabelle Steyer, that's supposed to join us remotely, but because of administrative problems and because also of technical problems, because she has not have a micro that can't be translated, and she can always speak in French, and there are many people in the room that don't speak French, so probably we cannot have her. This is quite unfortunate. Or she can't speak, but only French speaking people could understand her, so probably we could allow her to do it, and later on probably make a very small summary or something in English or in other language from the room, or probably a French colleague to do it. Probably you can do it a small summary, but I can do it, so it's okay. I can do it, and then have a translation, because it will be really a pity not to have it. We have also Mr. Carlos Farinha, Deputy National Director of the Polícia Judiciária de Portugal, bem-vindo, and Mr. José Manuel Vallejo, First Corporal of the Spanish Civil War, bienvenido. Their expertise will help us better understand the challenges of chemical submission, identify effective responses. Chemical submission refers to the non-consensual administration of psychoactive substances for criminal or legal purposes. It is most commonly linked to sexual violence against women, so why it is a very important topic for us here in FUN Committee. And victims often wake up with no memory of what has happened and unable to seek immediate help or provide evidence. The effects are not only physical, but deeply psychosociological, leaving survivors with lasting trauma, fear, and too often a sense of helplessness. Yet, for many, seeking justice remain a challenging objective. The nature of these substances makes detection difficult. Many leave the body within hours, leaving victims with little to no physical proof, considering also the all too often lengthy and complicated reporting procedures. At the same time, fear of not being believed, that we know very well in this committee, self-blame or social stigma discourages many from reporting their experiences at all. Hence, how can we bridge the gap between victims, law enforcement, and medical professionals to ensure more effective prevention, stronger reporting mechanisms, and access to justice? It is the question that it is behind in the aim of this hearing. More importantly, it should not be open for any debate that if sexually assaulted, women who were not able to react were in fact not able to give any consent to a sexual activity. Absence of objections does not mean, in such case, consent. Combating the use of chemical submission requires a coordinated response at multiple levels, raising awareness, improving forensic capabilities for detection, strengthening legal frameworks, and ensuring accessible, timely medical, psychological, and legal supports for survival are all essential. But we must also educate ourselves, speak loudly about this phenomenon, and be ready to identify and close gaps in our response. I therefore look forward to today's discussion, and I now pass the floor to my co-chair, so Madame Metz, the floor is yours, and thank you for this joint meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lina, for your words and for your introduction. Good morning and welcome to this public hearing on chemical submission. I am happy to be present today for this very important topic as Vice Chair of the Committee of Public Health, together with the colleagues from the Committee of Women's Rights and Gender Equality, to introduce this important discussion. A warm welcome also to our speakers of today. Our joint hearing today will focus on the challenges to address the alarming phenomenon of chemical submission characterized by the non-consensual use of drugs or chemical substances to incapacitate individuals, affecting their ability to resist to aggression, or even, as said already by Lina, to remember events. So, as just mentioned, this phenomenon is mainly associated with crimes such as sexual assault, where perpetrators use these substances to subdue their victims. So, beyond its devastating impact on the physical and psychological health of the victims, chemical submission also poses significant public health challenges. With the appearance of new synthetic drugs, the range of substances used in this context has diversified now. Cases of chemical submission now include drugs prescribed for other purposes, as well as synthetic drugs created to evade current laws and controls. Many of these substances are difficult to detect with standard toxicological tests, increasing the complexity of chemical submission cases and presenting significant challenges for health professionals and law enforcement authorities. Our efforts should therefore focus on improving the detection techniques and ensure effective preventive strategy. In order to create an integrated response to this phenomenon, it is crucial to understand the pharmacological and toxicological effects of the substances used in chemical submission cases. Additionally, we must work toward greater awareness of this phenomenon and its impact on public health, including among healthcare professionals. It is also important to understand the regulation and availability of these substances, as well as social trends associated to their use and misuse. Our public hearing today gathers really experts from different fields and will allow us to shed light on these complex issues and discuss possible solutions to the worrying phenomenon of chemical submission. So I'm now pleased to give the floor to our invited speakers. So for 7 minutes each, so I know it's not a lot, but please try to stick to the time so that we can have a discussion afterwards. As said already by Lina, we have Professor Andrei Silczuk. He is from the Foundation and Medical University of Warsaw. We have Dr. Leila Chaouachi, and as said already, also she's a pharmacist. We have Mrs. Isabelle Steyer, lawyer and expert in the rights of women. I don't say everything again because it was already said. We have Mr. Carlos Farinha, Deputy National Director of the Polícia Judiciária from Portugal, and Mr. José Manuel Vallejo, First Caporal of the Spanish Civil Guard. Voilà, so I will give the floor now. I think it's online. Yeah, Professor Andrei Silczuk, are you there? And welcome.
Yes, I am.
Yes, you are. So welcome to the FAM-Sant committee, and we are eager to listening to you.
Thank you. Esteemed members of European Parliament, in 2021, the Sex-Ed-PL Foundation launched the Anti-Violence Helpline Line, offering professional support not only to survivors and witnesses of violence, but also to perpetrators seeking change. In the past year alone, the helpline recorded over 10,000 contacts, reflecting a widespread and urgent need for intervention. Analysis of these interactions reveals a consistent and deeply troubling trend. Sexual violence in Poland nightlife is not incidental. It is systemic and widespread. These findings prompt a large-scale study to quantify and understand the scope of this public health emergency. Sexual violence within party and nightlife environments is no longer an isolated behavioral aberration. It constitutes a structural public health and human rights crisis, both in Poland and across Europe. Data from our recent and large-scale sociological and behavioral study conducted in Poland indicate that 78% of partygoers have experienced or witnessed sexual violence. This prevalence far exceeds that of many other forms of interpersonal harm reported in similar contexts and reflects a normalized pattern of sexual aggression, particularly against women. The data reveals stark gender asymmetries. 75 to 78% of women report fear for their safety in nightlife spaces compared to just 38% of men. These disparities are not simply expressions of subjective fear. They are rational response to accumulated experiences of gender-based violence. Furthermore, the ubiquity
Could you please speak a bit slower because our interpreters are asking us to do so. Thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt you.
Thank you for this notice. Furthermore, the ubiquity of precautionary behaviors reported by 93% of participants underscores the extent to which individuals perceive the threat of violence as unavoidable. Notably, such behaviors do not address the systemic roots of harm. They are compensatory strategies in absence of institutional protection. One of the most alarming findings concerns the intersection of sexual violence and psychoactive substance use. 55%, that's over every second, of respondents encountered sexual violence involving alcohol and drugs. And that is consistent with global data on nightlife-related, substance-facilitated sexual violence. Even more troubling is the accessibility and confirmed use of chemical incapacitating agents. 20% suspect that they were administered a so-called rape drug. 15% are certain of such an experience. 40% believe that these substances are readily obtainable. 40% report knowing how to procure them. This reflects not only a high prevalence of pharmacological facilitation, but also systemic failures in drug regulation, venue monitoring, and law enforcement. Despite the gravity of these incidents, 66% of individuals who suspect chemical incapacitation report that the event was not reported, or they are unsure whether it was reported at all. This one reflects a crisis of institutional trust. Victims often perceive the justice system as ineffective, dismissive, or even re-traumatizing. This phenomenon is well documented in criminological literature, and it underscores the necessity of trauma-informed, victim-centered approaches within both legal and healthcare systems. Contrary to claims of public apathy, the data reveal a clear public mandate for change. 91% want more knowledge on sexual violence. 87% support national educational campaigns. 92% believe that private sector should actively engage in prevention. This indicates not only awareness of issue, but a strong, unmet demand for evidence-based, continuous public education, especially on topics like consent, bystander intervention, and institutional response. Now, based on the evidence, we are putting forward a set of strategic recommendations. These are designed as a multi-level, evidence-based framework for European Union to consider. First, we recommend mandatory training in all nightlife establishments. This should include how to identify risk, how to intervene safely as a bystander, and how to respond using trauma-informed approaches. Second, we propose the creation of an EU-wide certification system for safe venues, modeled after health and safety standards, and that would require compliance with clear anti-violence protocols. Third, we call for the launch of public health campaigns. Those should be developed in collaboration with experts in sexual violence prevention and science communication, that will ensure messages are both accurate and impactful. Fourth, we need stronger regulation of and oversight of drugs linked to substance-facilitated sexual violence. And this includes investing in forensic infrastructure to improve detection and accountability. And finally, we urge the establishment of better victim reporting mechanisms, staffed by trained professionals with clear legal protections, and those should guard against retaliation. By conclusions, sexual violence in nightlife settings is not an anomaly. It is a predictable outcome of environmental permissiveness, insufficient regulation, and institutional inertia. The data are unequivocal. This is a measurable, repeatable, and preventable phenomenon. From both a public health and human rights standpoint, inaction is indefensible If we fail to act at the structural level, we implicitly condone the reproduction of violence. The European Union has the legal mandate, the moral responsibility, and the policy tools to lead. The time to transition from documentation to action is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very interesting but also sometimes shocking input that you gave when I hear that 66% of the events are not reported, also due of institutional mistrust. That is something we need to act. But you said also a lot of things we have to do, and on a du pain sur la planche, like we say in French. Thank you very much, Professor Silczuk. I will give immediately the floor to Dr. Laila Chaouachi, pharmacist at the Paris Addictovigilance Center and founder of the Reference Center on Substance Facilitated Assaults. You have the floor, Laila.
Oui, je vous remercie pour votre invitation.
Thank you for your invitation. Now, I'll go quite quickly because we don't have much time. So we can move straight on to the slides. Now, chemical solutions, to start with your definition, this next slide, is nothing new, really. These aggressions, these assaults facilitated by drugs are common in... Just go through the slides, please, because they're... Is there any way I can control the slides and flip them myself? Because we don't need all of them. Can I do it, or does it have to go? No, I can't. Okay. So if you can go right to the start of the... Right to the first slide, please. First slide. There we go. Next. So, chemical submission. Well, that's the question. That means drugging someone under the threat of doing something criminal. It's a different operation, which is chemical vulnerability, which is voluntary consumption of the drugs, which make it similar to an assault. With one, there's no agreement from the victim. In the other, the victim drugged him or herself before being sexually assaulted. We can move on to the next one. Well, it's always existed. You can find it in literature. Next slide. Love filters, for instance, love potions we talk about. And then there were talk already in 2025, we were talking about scopolamine. You find it in the Odyssey when the men were transformed into pigs. Dionysus got his victims drunk before violating them. So and it's not just in medieval stories or in myth. You find it in criminal cases, and we've seen this since the 70s as well. So the first public health denouncement was in 1978, was by a person who identified children in a lethargic state. So they were submitted through drugs, and it was part of child abuse. And in that framework, it was confirmed in 1997, and the medicine agency checked the drugs to see what the criminal use of drugs in France were, and there we realized that they were drugs that were used for something else. Initially, it was called medical submission. So since the beginning of this millennium, we started to see through liquid chromatography, with the expert laboratories, where it was possible to see whether we could reveal the presence of these drugs. Next. Of course, even though it's a new phenomenon, there was a change in 2021. There was free speech, And we saw this started in Belgium, and it appeared in many European media. Next slide. So this movement, which started in Europe, became international until we had the hashtag #MeTooGHP. And then it was also pointed out by these injections, malevolent injection, which is not chemical submission, but drugs had been introduced through an injection to the victims. And then over time, we've seen this, this becomes the maximum type of abuse over women, and it's been mentioned a lot on the media, on social media. Now, we find it everywhere. You go from parties to the private sector. Carolina mentioned violence and assault at home. She mentioned the various victims of family rape. And then there was also the cases of the Senator Joël Garneau with the hashtag Senator Park. And this was, so it covers both party, so social areas, family and politics. Then we see the complaints on general sexual rape, but with the question of public health. We find this in our structures, and we found the suspicion of the administration of drugs. I'm sorry I don't have the time. However, the speaker doesn't realize that if she speaks too fast, she can't be interpreted. So she's wasting her time anyway. Now, our reference centre, when it becomes a question of urgency because of a crisis in society, also from the point of view of awareness raising and information and training, different types of expertise. So the objective today is to show this diagnostic. So what happened in the field. Now, it's a dark time at the moment. You have to have a memory here. The first point is the extent of the ideas received, aggressions, assaults that were facilitated by substances, by drugs. And this appears in all domains, the profile of the victims, of the perpetrators, where they happen, and how the victims are drugged. Then, worse than received ideas, there's also, which is partial, but even though there's a basis of reality, it's usually women and it's sexual abuse, even though it's not only that. But what is worse is fake news. There's no basis whatsoever. So, for example, we've seen from so-called experts who've explained that they can identify whether a glass has been drugged, but no, attackers use drugs that are with no taste, transparent, and no smell. And then there are many cases when we talk about the injections, that's false. It doesn't mean talk. And then there's a question of resources available to the public to eliminate this situation with greater interest on this theme. And immobilizing the fact that the media are not doing much when they should try to counterbalance the fake news and these cliches. Now, there's also a greater interest taking on board by the victims. There have been there's a growing request for taking it on board. So there's a greater demand for taking on board, which had to deal with the errors, the mistaken information on the part of so-called experts on when there's a suspicion of chemical submission. And then it is all very varied over the territory, and you can't tell people do this or do that, because it's not the same everywhere. And there isn't just one solution, because each area has its own reality. So in practice, you say to the victims, be quick, do something without telling them in what direction to go. Then there's a lack of taking on board the victims, and then finally, when they are welcomed into emergency rooms, so with a lack of training of the professionals, which will also have to deal with listening services, because on the one hand you have people who know drugs but don't know about violence or rape, and only know about drugs taken by willing drug addicts, and then the others who know everything about rape but nothing much about drugs and the criminal use of drugs. So the services which take in the victims in France depend only if they denounce the rape, but the victims don't want to. For many reasons they don't want to. They feel guilty, they are afraid, or amnesia. But often, and beyond all that, this guilt due to the voluntary use of substances. I got drunk, I took the drugs, so I can't really go and denounce the assault. So it's very easy to say that victims don't go and denounce things. It's not that. You can't blame them for not having done the job. There's a lot to be done. What is worse, and that is our responsibility, is not have enough systems to accompany the victims. So the reality is the victims are isolated, and that's our balance. Well, we're looking for private proof. I show this photograph of a patient I took. She was literally mutilated. You see this lack of, her hair was ripped out, so it was a double assault. Now here you're seeing all these people who had all sorts of assaults due to the administration of drugs. And then you need a therapy. And then there's a mistake in the type of therapy that is offered, which will damage physical health, mental health, and social professional health, and economic too, because they keep telling us the toxicological analysis are too expensive. 1,100 euros for a urine test, and even more for hair tests. But I'm saying what is really expensive is a rape, is the violence, and we should be offering these services. Now, we've got to look at public health. There have been falls, traumas, substance abuse, food reactions, the infections, and more general bad psychological damage. So for us, and this is my conclusion, we could simply change the whole system. What we can't do at the moment. But for us, it's important to create a dedicated structure. That's why we created CRAFTS, the Center for the Substance Abuse, where all women, the pharmacologists, have been trained on psychotraumas, on rape, and on criminal use. And I will tell you about this center if you are interested. Thank you. We took longer, but you had a few problems at the beginning. But if I can ask all the speakers to really leave us their presentation so we can put them on the website, because there was a lot of interesting information there and we couldn't show it. And seeing you come from France, please, could you show that to Giselle Pericot to encourage her too? Now, without any further ado, I give the floor to Isabelle Steyer.
Violence, La Voix de l'Enfant, and we must have remotely. And she will not be translated, so we try to manage. Vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup de m'accueillir. Je suis désolée, je n'ai pas reçu les micros, je suis absolument désolée. Évidemment, je suis d'accord avec tout ce qui a été dit et j'exerce depuis 32 ans ce métier auprès des victimes de violences sexistes et sexuelles, et notamment, puisque j'interviens là pour la voix de l'enfant, sur les victimes mineures de violences sexistes et sexuelles, mais pas que. On va voir que la soumission chimique, c'est aussi pousser les mineurs non accompagnés à voler, à commettre des infractions, et c'est aussi utilisé pour amener les mineurs à se prostituer. Alors, je voulais d'abord commencer par ce qui a été développé formidablement par Madame Chaouachi et le précédent intervenant, c'est-à-dire que nous avons actuellement, en tous les cas au niveau judiciaire, hein, donc, je vous parle des dossiers que l'on a, des viols commis en réunion ou pas sur des mineurs, et désormais sur des mineurs de moins de 15 ans, on peut penser à des mineurs de 12 ans à peu près, qui, à la faveur de soirées qui commencent comme étant des soirées festives, vont ingérer des substances qui sont, il faut le dire, que la première des substances, la première des soumissions chimiques, c'est l'alcool. Et donc, effectivement, on va les alcooliser. D'abord, les premières prises sont ingérées volontairement, et puis après, on va avoir soit des shots d'alcool extrêmement forts, soit des médicaments ou des substances qui seront mises dans les verres, soit des choses tout à fait nouvelles, hein. On a les gaz hilarants, on a les drogues de synthèse, et on va avoir quelque chose de très compliqué à gérer au niveau judiciaire, c'est que ces toutes jeunes filles, ou d'ailleurs c'est tous jeunes hommes, hein, c'est quelque chose aussi d'assez nouveau, c'est que les jeunes garçons commencent à parler également de viol à la faveur de soirées comme celle-là. Mais on va avoir des jeunes filles donc âgées de moins de 15 ans, avec la circonstance aggravante donc de mineurs de moins de 15 ans, pour la France en tous les cas, qui vont se trouver donc droguées, dans une situation dans laquelle qu'elles ne comprennent absolument pas, et encore moins parce que c'est parfois leur première, enfin c'est pas une relation, mais vous l'avez bien compris, leur premier lien avec la sexualité, donc avec le viol, et l'impossibilité d'en parler à leurs parents puisqu'elles n'osent pas, et le docteur Chaouachi a parfaitement parlé de la question de la culpabilité, notamment de la culpabilité de ces mineurs qui ne comprennent pas ce qui leur est arrivé, avec pour conséquence toutes les maladies évidemment sexuellement transmissibles, les pilules de lendemain à chercher, à trouver, et voire les IVG. Et on se retrouve actuellement avec une problématique, on va dire massive, de très jeunes mineurs qui subissent ces faits-là. Donc, premier problème pour moi juridique, c'est arriver jusqu'à elle, ou elle arrive jusqu'à l'association, mais il faut que ce soit dans des délais relativement courts, puisque vous savez, la question c'est la preuve, la question c'est tout le reste concernant leur vie sexuelle, leur vie psychologique, et la qualification pénale qui est actuellement, on a une commission avec Sandrine Josso pour la qualification pénale, puisqu'actuellement en droit français, nous ne cumulons pas la question de la minorité de moins de 15 ans, qui est une circonstance aggravante qui fait encourir à l'agresseur 20 ans de prison, et la soumission chimique. Donc, on est dans une situation où il faut choisir entre la minorité de 15 ans et le mode opératoire qui fait que, eh bien, ces victimes, donc mineures ou majeures, hein, on a les mêmes problématiques évidemment pour les majeurs, n'ont pas accès à leur témoignage. Et moi, je milite et je serais favorable à ce qu'il y ait effectivement maintenant un cumul de circonstances aggravantes et un cumul qui soit vraiment pris en compte. Pourquoi ? Parce qu'on fait en sorte que la victime n'ait pas la seule chose qu'elle ait dans le viol, c'est-à-dire l'accès à son récit, l'accès à son histoire. Et lorsque l'on a une victime de soumission chimique, on a ce que l'on appelle, dans le jargon, tout est à mettre entre guillemets dans ce que je dis là, une mauvaise victime. C'est-à-dire que elle ne se souvient pas de ce qui s'est passé, comment ça s'est passé, avec qui ça s'est passé, et quand elle arrive devant des policiers dans cette situation qui, une fois sur deux, ne sont absolument pas formés, parfois beaucoup trop tard. Et là aussi, je cautionne tout à fait ce qu'a dit Madame le docteur Chaouachi, c'est-à-dire que on circule dans des idées reçues, mais encore plus dans l'institution judiciaire, sur la soumission chimique. Parce que personne ne sait actuellement au sein de la magistrature ce qu'est une victime de soumission chimique et surtout de quoi elle a l'air. Parce qu'elle n'est pas forcément effondrée dans une soirée, dans une boîte de nuit ou dans la rue. Elle peut avoir un comportement justement très sexualisé, ça peut désinhiber, et on pense donc que si ça désinhibe, et si elle paraît comme cela, elle voulait la relation sexuelle. Donc on est là aussi dans une soumission qui inverse la culpabilité, qui inverse la responsabilité, qui inverse le sens des choses, ce qui est extrêmement grave pour des mineurs lorsqu'elles se retrouvent dans ce type de situation. Et là, je peux décliner, hein. Il en est de même pour les experts, pour le juge d'instruction, pour l'avocat, pour les avocats, et elle va très vite se retrouver dans on a un nombre massif de classements sans suite, et puis après de non-lieux. Donc en France, on en est à plus de 85% de classements sans suite, sachant que généralement, quand ce sont des soirées entre amis, entre copains, elle connaissait son agresseur. Donc c'est encore plus difficile de déposer plainte, voire elle était même chez elle ou chez des amis. Donc on cumule toutes les difficultés pour arriver jusqu'à une plainte et jusqu'à une condamnation, parce que le problème c'est que comme ça marche, eh bien ça continue et ça valide ce mode opératoire qui est extrêmement facile à fabriquer des victimes et des victimisations secondaires. Alors, je vois, j'en suis déjà à 7 minutes. Je ne vais pas pouvoir parler de la prostitution et des vols. 2 mots. On a actuellement des services très organisés, des groupes très organisés de délinquants qui recrutent des mineurs non accompagnés pour leur faire commettre des vols. Et qui pour cela vont les droguer, d'abord là aussi pour ne pas pouvoir expliquer lorsqu'ils sont interpellés comment ils en sont arrivés là, mais aussi pour les faire dépendre de la drogue. Donc on connaît le problème des mineurs non accompagnés en France et en Europe, et on a une exploitation donc des mineurs accompagnés pour commettre des délits.
Excusez-moi, vous pouvez venir à la conclusion parce que...
Well, could you reach your conclusion, please? Because it's we don't have much time. If you can summarize or be more concise, I'm sorry.
La prostitution, on a la même problématique de victimes qui sont elles-mêmes recrutées au sein de l'aide sociale à l'enfance pour être prostituées en étant sous soumission chimique. Donc la conclusion, c'est vraiment la question de la preuve, hein. Je rejoins tout à fait ce qui a été dit, à la fois de la preuve pour amener, parce que le système judiciaire se bat avec ces questions-là, et de la lutte contre finalement les idées reçues au sein de l'institution judiciaire pour qu'il puisse y avoir une appréhension et une compréhension de ce phénomène-là. Voilà quelles étaient très, très brièvement mes observations, Madame la Présidente.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Steyer. Est-ce que vous pourrez nous...
Oh, could you send us your presentation in writing? That way we can translate it and publishing on the website, because you've got a lot of important information there too.
In 2 sentences, I think the main message is that you wanted to come over that often with minors that are under alcohol, and it starts off with alcohol, so that there are girls and boys that have around 12 years, and that we need more training on the subject. There's often a lack of knowledge from every professional around them, and also that the main question is always the question of proof, and that often the images given as these children were agreeing on things, but we speak about children here. So the main question, as you say, is proof, lack of knowledge, and that we really have to be better prepared to encounter those situations. But that is really in 2 sentences because we are lacking out of time. So without losing more time, but thank you again, Madame Steyer, I will give the floor to Mr. Carlos Farinha, Deputy National Director of the Polícia Judiciária from Portugal.
So,
Vou-me expressar como foi prometido em português.
So, good morning. You know, as it was mentioned, I will speak Portuguese. First of all, I would like to thank you for having been invited to come to this discussion. I'd like to thank you from an institutional point of view from Portugal, but this is an important subject. I'd like to say hello to all, to the President and the Vice President and all the others who spoke and the colleague from the Guardia Civil, from the Spanish Guardia Civil. And I certainly hope that this knowledge their knowledge will cover the gaps in my knowledge. And also like to welcome everyone who is following us. And thank you for your work. And I'd like to start out by thanking the interpreters for the help they are offering. So thank you to everyone. Now, I'm Carlos Parinha. As I said, I'm the National Vice Director of the Judicial Police in Portugal, but I'm mainly a policeman with over 40 years' experience, a long career in this type of investigation. Of course, I'm an observer and this as well, but this conditions my position, and I see this world with a different point of view. And of course, there'll always be other knowledge and other truths on the subject. So, first of all, I'm happy to take part in this discussion. But again, I think that this participation, to a certain extent, can be dealt with from 3 points of view. First of all, the criminal investigation carried out as to for sexual crimes that happen in Portugal. We do have powers that oblige us to have specialized human resources with a specific training, and we have to guarantee the adequate and comfortable physical spaces for our vulnerable victims. So we've got to have various knowledge as far as the digital part, forensic science, and our meetings with the victims. And that's just the first basis of what I want to say. 10% of the criminals who are investigated are usually sexual crimes. The second aspect is an internal observatory we set up in 2022 to improve good practices and monitor on a quarterly basis the development of the phenomenon, as this is a theme that I believe is a constant development, and also my support to the laboratory from the scientific belief, of the forensic belief. And here, the next slide. The laboratory is a reference laboratory for the European Agency for Drug Dependency. This is the Commissioner, Liebe Jonsson, who takes part in the alert systems for identifying new substances. And one of the problems we have for chemical submission is due to the question of the alert systems. There's a difficulty when there's constant development of these drugs. When we're talking about chemical submission, we're talking about something that is unacceptable, which becomes rape too. It develops into rape. So sexual abuse and rape is unacceptable, full stop. And this is the motto of a campaign that was launched in Portugal by the Commission for Minors' Rights of the health system, the school system, with the idea being that rape is unacceptable and violence is unacceptable, full stop.
Thanks.
And that means that we need to end this with a massive exclamation point. Sexual violence is an abuse of power, a lack of respect, a violation of rights, victimization, and it takes away from liberty and autonomy. We're not talking about anything new here, of course. This is something that we've known for a long time under different formats. This is something that happens to students when they're at a party, in which very often what's a dream turns into a nightmare. It's nothing new. But what is new is new substances. And the effects that they have, and the fact that you can hide them so easily. They don't have a smell. Which makes them easy to hide. This is what makes the situation so difficult for us. Next slide, next slide. To identify these substances, we don't have many resources at our disposal, which makes it difficult to carry out tests. To test exactly what caused the chemical submission. There are different combinations possible, different types of drugs. Now, here's a case study. Let's be clear that no victim can be blamed for this. The blame always goes to the author of the crime. 92% of our victims are female. Generally speaking, they are between the ages of 21 and 30. Our judicial analysis can also be supplemented by statistics because it shows, despite the fact that one victim is one victim too many. We have male victims. 94% of the perpetrators are male. Quite often, they are cold and calculating quite often in their approach and use quite clear psychological mechanisms when they carry out their crimes. It's a planned, calculated action that they take. Next slide. I would just like to point out a few things, and then I'll wrap up. First of all, this dimension of sexual violence that is chemical submission has reached unacceptable levels. We need to respond to it. And that means all sorts of entities must respond to it. That is psychologists, education, prosecutors, so on and so forth. We need a network of support because chemical submission is something we need to fight. It's only on the rise. You can see that in the 2025 numbers. They're higher than 2023 and 2024. So you can see we need to fight against these traffic networks. We also need to work together with healthcare professionals so that we are firing on all cylinders against this phenomenon. We also need to regain trust from our victims, which is easier said than done. They might not remember what has happened. They feel guilty. They feel victimized by the system. We need to help them. Thank you very much. This concludes my presentation.
Muito obrigada. It was very interesting and a lot of input. And I give the floor to our last speaker, Mr. José Manuel Vallejo, first caporal in the Spanish Civil Guard. You have the floor. 7 minutes or maximum, absolute maximum, 9.
Bueno, voy a hablar en español.
I will be speaking Spanish. Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you to the commissions. It's really wonderful to be speaking with all of these different speakers today because I would also like to say thank you to my colleague from the Portuguese police. And I can tell you about my experience in policing and as a social worker. Now, in police work, when it comes to trafficking drugs, we're talking about different pharmaceuticals as well, and drugs that are trafficked. For the police, there's all different types of victims of these crimes. Usually we talk about sexual crimes, but what we need to do to combat these types of crimes is have close coordination between police and healthcare workers. Now, what we're talking about here are drug-facilitated crimes, and that includes sexual crimes. Chemical submission, though, also includes abuse of elders and minors, it includes robbery, and it does include sexual offenses. But remember that sexual crimes also include abuse or overlap with abuse. Now, and from a social sanitary standpoint, usually when it comes to recreational drug use, we talked about it in terms of hygiene or prevention. We talk about safe use of drugs, for example. You can see guides about this, brochures in schools and addiction centers and in disadvantaged areas. But these types of brochures don't really get to their target audience. The Spanish Health Ministry talked about, even had a guide on safe chemsex, that is sex that involves the voluntary use of drugs. It's quite a lot of people think of that as being quite deviant. Now, from an institutional standpoint, there's these types of brochures that come from institutions are not really highly accepted by their target audience because this is a bit of a deviant sector. What people we're talking about here tend to be sexual aggressors or what have you. So this type of deviant behavior also includes this propensity to commit these types of crimes. Usually, when we think of sexual aggression, we think of a young woman who is sedated or incapacitated because something's been slipped into her drink, and then she's abused or raped by men that she either knows or doesn't know. But it's not always the case. In fact, it usually is not. We need to debunk this myth. The types of cases that we think of in Europe are not reflected in official statistics. And that is if you compare it with the number of cases, the rising number of cases of chemical submission that we're seeing in Europe. We're talking about a physical incapacity due to drugs. Sometimes it's not a submission per se. The professor Leila also mentioned this. She talked about this psychological incapacity of the victim and the state of vulnerability that they're in. Often, though, it doesn't start with drugs, it starts with alcohol because it's easier to access. Now, so there's also the fact that you have to distinguish between seeking out a victim, an aggressor seeking out a victim, or someone acting opportunistically to submit them chemically and to make them involuntarily consume those substances. So that's one method. And then there's the opportunistic method. There's also there are aggressors who will premeditate this whole thing, plan it out beforehand to incapacitate the victim. And the victim might have consumed something on purpose or by accident. Now, there are some studies about this. The most recent are from 2021. This is from the National Institute of Toxicology and Forensic Sciences in Spain. What it makes clear to us is what we already know, is that 94% of victims, just like my Portuguese colleague said, are women, usually quite young, up to age 24, and that quite often the crimes are sexual in nature. Now, what this shows us is that of the 17,000 sexual crimes, 950 involved chemical submission. 17.5% were tested negative and 82.5% tested positive for substances. So we need to know how to tackle this problem. You might not be surprised to learn that alcohol is present in 57% of cases, either alone or in combination with other substances. 50% had very high levels of alcohol, 1.2 grams per liter, which is enough to get you a drunk driving arrest. And then there's cannabis, THC, and other drugs that follow alcohol. Now, in 2023, that's the most recent data that we have, 37.3% of aggressors were foreign. They only make up 13% of the population, though, so there's a major overrepresentation there. Now, obviously, I'm not trying to offend anyone here, but we do need to know about this type of information because it helps us create a profile of what's going on. It's the issue, unfortunately, when it comes to testing for drugs isn't necessarily that the drugs have different types of effect they're difficult to test for. And unfortunately, they're also very easy to access. Now, conclusions. Chemical submission it doesn't make up a vast part of sexual aggressions. And it does seem like that most of these crimes are carried out by a small number of people. But this is something that we need to tackle. We need to have a scientific method. We need to make sure that we have sociological and criminological methodology behind us. And we need to know that we need to have good messaging about consumption. We need to work with law enforcement. And we need to make sure that we have indemnification for victims and that they are cared for psychologically. And we have to also remember that some of these victims undergo different types of DSM-type mental illnesses, which is not acceptable. This means that, of course, there are very high risks to people who have been subjected to chemical submission. It could even be lethal. And it really depends on a lot of different factors. Most of the aggressors have diagnosed mental illnesses.
Translated, you need to speak slowly, but really the last sentence. Thank you.
Okay. Termino con una...
So I have one very simple sentence to close with. If psychologically we can determine that there are different type of psychological profiles that are behind these different types of aggressors, then we need to make sure that we are very targeted and accurate in how we approach it. And we need to make sure that the fundamental rights of aggressors are compatible with those of the victims. We really need to focus, though, on the rights of victims. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Raises also some questions, but I will leave now the time for questions and answers to my colleague Lina Galvez, chair from the FAM committee, please.
So thank you very much. So now we'll still have a few minutes. I'm sure it will be a very lively debate because different opinions has been done here in this debate. So I'm sure also the different representatives from our political parties will also make some questions. So we will start by EPP. Andras Kulja, please, the floor is yours for just 1 minute, 1 minute and a half. And I will be very strict with the time, otherwise we will not have time for the discussion. I have the hammer, so I will use it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues, dear speakers. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think it's very important that we talk about this topic, and even more important to do everything we can do to prevent these terrible crimes. My first question will be to Professor Silczuk. From psychiatric and public health perspective, what trends have you observed in how chemical submission is seen, normalized, or hidden within social environments in Poland or broader Eastern Europe, particularly among youth? And my second question to Mr. Vallejo, what kind of collaborations either across EU countries or between police and healthcare do you think are essential to improving early detection and prevention of drug-facilitated assaults? Thank you.
Thank you very much for good time. So now for the S&D and some committee, Leire Pajín, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to the experts for sharing their knowledge. Let me switch to Spanish now. Estimadas colegas,
Colleagues, I'd like to say that it is obvious, it's a good example of what we have here in this code. It's not from Pelicot. This is a reflection of the most dangerous types of crimes that we have. These are aggressors that can act on the street, on clubs, or whatever. Anybody can be a victim, and the aggressors can be anyone. It could be someone you know, it could be students, journalists, a doctor, someone in your family. These are things that we've heard. We've heard the ages, people in their 30s and 40s. And what is at the base of this is this machisto type of mentality. This is a culture that has something against us. A number of men think that they have this entitlement to women's bodies. Chemical submission is not just about drugs or drinking. It's a part of sexual culture. And it's something that's very difficult to know how to tackle. The tools that we have to fight against chemical submission are very important, but we shouldn't be putting the responsibility to protect themselves on women. What we need to do is understand and help the victims. Thank you. Now I'll give Margarita de la Pisa this floor. Thank you. After having listened to all of the presentations, I think we need to ask how we got here. For example, I don't know if I grew up with these types of threats. And I think what we need to do is look at what the limits are to these types of crimes. We need to look at where we are in terms of this type of perversion. When it comes to Pelicot or La Manada, it is extremely concerning. It seems it seems that the aggressors are working together. How are they doing that? They're doing it online. We need to protect the values that are at the basis of the European project. And we need to make sure that we respect people's dignity, especially women's dignity. We need to respect the right to your own body. And there are different contexts for this. When it comes to victims, if victims are met with indifference, then they become disillusioned. We need to have different types of exchanges with each other. If we don't, we need to make sure that we are working together. We need to work towards freedom and progress, and we need to have different. Don't we have 3 minutes? I said clearly a minute and a half. A minute and a half. Don't we usually have 3 minutes? No, we have a limited time. It's a minute and a half. I said a minute and a half, so please wrap it up. What's happened in our society? What are the habits in our society now that make it possible for this to happen? What type of profile do the victims have? What types do the aggressors have that make this possible? What can we do to fight it? Thank you. Laurence Trochon, 1 minute and a half. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the speakers. And those presentations really seem to work together well. We need to look at the background of the causes, and I would say that we have a number of different difficulties in trying to determine those causes, and it's very difficult, especially for victims, to remember what happened when the crime took place. My colleague said before about this male chauvinist approach in our society. And I think in Europe, this type of mindset is growing in Europe, perhaps due to influencers. But you underlined something about the fact that there's a large number of foreigners among these aggressors, and who maybe they come from places where relations between men and women are different. And I wonder if that's something worth looking at. They come from a place where women are not treated the same way as they are here. That might explain things. Finally, I have a question on the roles of pharmaceuticals in medications in this type of chemical submission. Are they freely available, or are they prescription only? Because there might be a way of regulating access to these types of medications. Thank you.
I remind you that it is, if you are saying anything that could be considered or in the limit of hate speech, please use the statistics. Otherwise, it will be considered hate speech. I will just remind you, and that will not be allowed in this chamber at all. Okay, so now we pass on Renew, Valérie Devon. Merci.
Oui, gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the presenters for providing their expertise on this topic. And I would like to highlight Gisèle Pellico's bravery for overcoming her shame over what happened to her. We need to have concrete measures in place to prevent these crimes and punish the perpetrators. Now, I have the following questions. What do you think are the most, or least protected, most vulnerable groups? And what can we do to have prevention campaigns that will reach them? Ms. Chaouachi, you talked about new structures that are dedicated to this issue. What are those? And what results have they had so far, if you can tell us about that? Finally, do you think that the healthcare professionals, law enforcement professionals, are they sufficiently made aware of this chemical submission, and what are your recommendations in doing so? Do you think that access to violent images, sexual images, to people who are younger and younger is something that's having an effect on this situation? And what do you think, finally, are the best measures that we can take at European level to fight this more effectively? Thank you.
Merci. Je vais commencer.
Thank you very much. I'll speak French. I'm grateful for all the presentations. As has been recalled, this is not a new issue, and I think our mothers and grandmothers lived in societies where this was very much a problem. Violence was a problem. Violence has always been there, and the patriarchy is still here in Europe, despite what some would like us to believe. I come from France, and indeed, the Pellico case has caused a great deal of shock in France. But feminists are saying, we've always known this has been happening. No, rapists are not strangers that you come across in an alleyway. It's people that you know. And I think this has been a kind of revelation for many people as they followed this trial. And it's revealed the dynamic of the patriarchy, rape culture. And during the hearings of the rapists, we saw the way that they spoke and how they tried to justify their rapes. And we're moving now from a culture of rape to a culture of consent. We heard about raising awareness, campaigns to do so. And I think the major issue today is sexual and relationships education all over Europe. So today we need to find a way to build a culture of equality and consent. We need to look at gender equality. Education is really important there. And we need to make sure consent is at the heart of our lives. Thank you very much. Now, Emma Fourreau, for the left. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentations as well. It's so important for us to have this hearing today, so I'm very grateful it's been organised. There are many cases that have been in the media, Joël Lescoranec, Pellico as well in France, and this shows that chemical submission cases are ordinary cases, respectable people, so to speak, are the rapists in these cases. So we're dealing with an issue with a culture of rape, a culture of violence, and the far right is trying to instrumentalize this fight against sexual violence and to scapegoat one part of the population. But we saw the Pellico case. We could see 51 people were prosecuted, and they come from all cultural and social backgrounds. We have someone from the army, someone from the medical sector, someone who was a fire officer. And it's really important that we identify the real cause of these problems so that we can actually fight chemical submission and sexual violence in general. So I want to know what can we do? What actions can we adopt so that we can attack this rape culture and make sure that we identify the right kinds of attackers? Thank you very much.
We'll have, normally we will give now the floor to the speakers, but there are not many other MEPs here present, so there are few people who ask the floor. So what I will do is to give now the floor to all the MEPs that ask for the floor, and then later on we will we will give back the floor to our speakers. So I will ask these speakers now to speak for just 1 minute. Like this, we will have also time to the rest. So I have in my list Johanna Schellin-Wilbus, and then Rovana Jerkovic, Til Metz, Elisabeth Grossman, Emma Rafovitz, and myself.
Thank you.
Okay, Johanna, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation. It was very interesting, and we see that your presentation complete each other, and we have all of point of view from public, from institutional, and from a medical point of view. And we know that we have a common problem, and we know that we have to do a lot in this problem. But I think that many people are listening to us, maybe young women, and maybe some of you have a recipe for this young woman, what to do. She's going to the club. Is there anything it should pay attention for this woman? Is it anything it should worry her? What she have to do if she sees something wrong? And I think this is very important because, like we said before, the social awareness is very low, the education is very low. And like a politician, we know that we have to do a lot. But if I'm going on Saturday to the club, what I have to do, what I have to see, yes? And I think it will be good advice for everybody, for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanna? Rovana?
Thank you. Thank you, chairs, both of you, for bringing much needed attention to the fact that women are being deliberately drugged and stripped of their consent and safety and dignity. Just last month, I read about the horrifying case in Kortrijk, where 3 bar owners drugged and sexually assaulted more than 40 women. And a few years ago, something very similar happened also in Brussels. And we heard that also this form of violence also affects children and minors, which is terrifying. And I would say that the lack of the action is truly alarming. Out of 27 member states, only France has recognized chemical submission as a serious offense and a specific form of gender-based violence. So I'm wondering what are waiting for the others 26. So more victims, more headlines, or what? I have a question for Professor Andrei Silczuk, the first speaker. He was talking about possible solutions, education, certification, but Professor, in your opinion, how can EU institutions help to solve this problem? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tilly.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. So the main message I really take out of this is that training is not optional, and also that we need comprehensive training, not only for law enforcement, prosecutors and the judiciary, but also for healthcare professionals that are often the first point of contact, especially as there is no specific profile for aggressors, nor for victims. I found it quite dangerous to speak about a specific profile of victims, to say. But let me come immediately to the question. First of all, I have a question to Leila Chaouachi. Based on your clinical experience, what protocols should be standard for emergency room personnel to better detect and document suspected cases of chemical submission? And then I hope he's still there, to Professor Silczuk. And I'm asking also because my daughter has restaurants and bars. Are there specific signs or behavioral indicators that non-medical professionals like barmen, bar staff or university personnel could be trained to recognize, so that we have also a larger place where people are prepared to react? So it was a little bit also the question from my colleague from Renew. And then as last, I really regret that on the EU directive on violence against women, we did not have the point only yes means yes, because this is fundamental, and definitely shame must change sides. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. But this is for the Council to respond. This is the last answer, not for us. We were very clear on our position. So, Elisabeth Grossmans, S&D, please.
Danke auch für die
Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentations. I think we can all agree that we're dealing with serious crimes here. And we need to be clear about who the attacker is and who the victim is. I'm interested to hear from the experts. I have a couple of questions. Which specific measures would be sensible here? So looking here, I have armbands, protective armbands, which allow you to detect drops of drugs in drinks. Do you have experience with these kind of bands? And are they useless in prevention in terms of distributing them and raising awareness about them, using posters and sharing them with young people? Have you got any experience with this sort of thing, and are they useful?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Emma Rafowitz, Sunday.
Oui, bonjour.
Good morning, Madam Co-Chairs. Thank you very much for these fascinating presentations. I have a few thoughts to share with you. Firstly, pure shock. In response to what I heard from you, your testimony, your presentations, thank you so much for all the work you're doing. It sounds like you're quite isolated in your work and there isn't enough support from the public sector. It's certainly something that needs to be supported. I'd like to share with you not just testimony, but my own shock. We know that chemical submission is so serious, such a hard thing to go through as a victim, not only in France, but elsewhere as well. We all followed the case of Gisèle Pelicot, of course. When I hear, though, the far right defending victims, or that's what they pretend they're doing, but in reality, we're talking about rapes, crimes being instrumentalized to serve a racist agenda. We need to be very clear. In Europe, women need to be protected. In the world, women need to be protected. In France, we cannot hide this issue behind such arguments. And I get so frustrated when people talk about our lives. How many women, how many of our friends, how many of our sisters have woken up in the morning not knowing where their underwear were, not knowing where their clothes from the night before are? What happened to me last night? That's what they are asking themselves. We all know that this happens and what this is like. And for you to say how many foreign people are doing this, do you realise how insulting that is to the victims? I find this truly shocking. Thank you to the presenters, and I know that we'll keep working on this because it's a very important issue indeed, and we must ensure safety in Europe. Thank you.
And now, since there is no one else, I will make a short question. I was also quite shocked by what Edma said, so I will not repeat that, but I completely agree with her. And very different things has been said in this discussion. To one hand, it was clear no victim is guilty, but on the other hand, it has been said that some victims are negligent because they have taken alcohol or they have taken drugs. So these are two different things. Also, it has been said a distinction between organized or a pre-organized perpetrator and opportunistic one. So if I have a knife in my hand, and I have no intention to do it, but at the end, so we don't ask that question in other crimes. So why we are thinking of that is less important to an opportunistic one that is taking advantage of that situation? Probably is we are not denying the existence of a structural gender-based violence, a structural inequality, if we are accepting that there are opportunistic perpetrators. If we assume there are not reinsertable profiles, it is not going against the fundamental principles of the European Union and our fundamental rights. These are my questions. So now we still have, I think, 2 minutes for each one, 2 minutes, because we'll be at the end 2 minutes and a half. Like this, we will end up on time that we really need to do it because our interpreters also need to go and everybody else need to go. So I guess first the floor to the professor. I have not the name. I could not. Silczuk, yes, Silczuk, please, the floor is yours. It's already difficult for me to say your name, even if I have not in front of me. It is absolutely impossible. So sorry about that. The floor is yours for 2 minutes. Thank you.
I will introduce myself. My name is Andrzej Silczuk. It's a pleasure. So I'll try briefly answer all the questions and queries you have issued here. First of all, we have to differentiate the responsibilities. We have a systemic one, which might be a responsibility of European Union Parliament, and then we can use every tool we have to provide effective solutions. And the second one is the individual one, the individual responsibility, which is overused in this context, because we have to strictly stand against any of sexual abuse, any kind of. and the substance-facilitated sexual abuse is one of them. We can differentiate the substances for the legal ones and unlegal ones. The legal ones might be achieved by prescription, but we have to notice that alcohol is one of them, and is the tricky one because no one is considering as a possible rape substance, but it is. Still, there are some symptoms for individuals to easily recognize you've been drugged. Everyone here might be drugged by those substances. You can order a juice, and this juice will be enhanced by some of these substances. If you feel some different effect as usual, and it appears after a couple minutes, up to 15, up to 30 minutes after use of any kind of drink you had, it might be possible that you need to find someone who's trusted, who will help you. So I'm crossing my fingers, and I wish that the European Parliament will be able to provide solutions. At the beginning of my short lecture, I have provided 5 points conclusions that the call to actions. So I hope that we will find effective ways. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We will share your presentations so like this, and we hope we will take a good note of it. So now I give the floor to Dr. Leila Chaouachi. The floor is yours for 2 minutes, please.
Oui, je vous remercie.
Thank you. I think it's important for me to start by saying something very clearly. Chemical submission is first and foremost a betrayal. Let's not be too nice to attackers by saying, oh, you know, it was a mistake, they weren't careful enough, and people didn't follow basic safety advice. Don't speak to strangers, don't get home too late at night. Because that is just making the lives of attackers too easy. We're talking about confidence being betrayed. Victims don't leave their drinks without supervision. They leave them with someone they trust. They accept drinks from people they trust. They do this in an environment where they lend their trust. So to suggest that it works any other ways is just a myth. Victims are not responsible for being tricked because it is a trick. They don't know what is happening to them before these crimes take place. There is no magic bullet against these crimes, against rape. There's no solution across the board. Testing drinks and so on. If it was enough to have a bracelet that can detect these drugs and drink covers, then we would have solved the problem a very long time ago. So what I wanted to say here really is that we need to do everything to make sure that the guilt and the responsibility is always in the right place. And it's never the victim's fault. When victims feel bad about the fact, even if they have used illegal drugs or drunk alcohol, that's considered to be a real issue in the French legal system when it comes to the consumption of drugs and so on. But we need to protect these people. We need to make sure that we call the emergency services when we think this might have happened. We need to make sure that the victims receive treatment as soon as possible to make sure that evidence is collected. We need to make sure that this happens regardless of whether or not a police report is filed. And the medical support needs to be there because first and foremost, it's not just a societal issue, this is a health issue. Thank you. Thank you. I now give the floor to Isabelle Steyer. You have the floor.
Non, elle n'est pas là. No. So meantime, we know if she's or not. Since we don't have much time, I will pass the floor to Mr. Carlos Fariña. Yeah, it's fine. As soon as you don't speak very fast, it's fine because our interpreters should do their job. So that's fine. Thank you.
Eu, sobretudo, gostava de agradecer.
I'd particularly like to express my gratitude for this discussion today and for this opportunity to exchange our points of view. I'd like to underline that, as far as we're concerned, victims are never at fault. It is not the victim's fault, including in cases where we see opportunist actions. That doesn't make it the victim's fault. The victim is exercising their freedom, and everyone is able to do that. Everyone is free to live their lives. So we have a complex, large-scale issue in the fields of forensics, health, justice, and we don't have one large solution. But what we can do is find a number of small solutions in each of these individual sectors, because that way we can optimize those solutions. I'd like to finish by recalling a victim I encountered not long ago. This victim did receive support, quality support, and was grateful for that support. The police treated this victim properly. So if we can work hard to respond, to prevent these situations, that's what we need to do. Because, of course, the ideal thing would be for these cases never to exist. In our society, we must be able to enjoy our freedoms. Thank you very much.
Tiene la palabra.
Microphone for the speaker, please.
Perdón. Fíjense que he terminado mi intervención diciendo...
Well, I finished my speech earlier saying that the rights of perpetrators can never prevail over the rights of the victims. But when we look at psychology, criminology, police science, these are the fields I work in. One thing that's important is studying the data. So we look at nothing else and only the data. So regardless of the colour of the skin of the person involved, it shouldn't matter. So when we look at the reports that we draw up in my country, the ministry of a government which certainly isn't what some of you called the far right. So 25% of perpetrators are known to the victim or are relatives. So this includes family, friends, someone you know through the university or someone you know from a bar. So most of them are not known to the victims. So most cases of these attacks with chemical submission will not take place in victims' homes or in areas near someone's home, so the stairs or the corridor, for instance. So it's less frequent that these cases take place in leisure venues like bars and so on. So we need to look at the reports, look at the crime reports, and those reports say to us that the percentage of foreigners, there's an overrepresentation of foreigners. And that's not being a segregationist, that's not being a racist. All we are doing is observing the data and weighing them up, because it's really important in criminology to look at the profile of the attacker, because that, just like in medicine, you need to be able to make a proper diagnosis. If you need to diagnose properly so that you can treat properly. Whether or not you can cure the illness is another question. But that's not saying that people with particular physical characteristics or the colour of their skin makes them more likely to be attackers. But we're just talking about science here. And for many decades, this is what we've observed, looking at psychology and other sectors. So let me say to you, please forget ideology, put it to one side and focus on the science. And that is how we can find a way to solve this problem. Thank you very much. And now
the floor to my co-chair, Madame Metz, for her conclusions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to react, and we have 47% foreigners in Luxembourg. We must have a very high percentage of it. So I still found it not the right way to attack, to tackle the issue. Yeah. So first of all, I would like, nevertheless, to really thank our experts for their very valuable input to this important debate, which highlighted definitely the need for a multidisciplinary approach in the response to chemical submission. And I must also say to my co-chair that I hope we will continue to have some hearings together, but because I think it's very important in order to have this holistic approach and also to tackle complex issues, because this issue requires not only dedicated attention to victim support and education, but also to health policies at the national and EU level. So today debates really confirm that collaboration between different actors and across different sectors is really key to develop effective prevention, detection and treatment strategies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you. We are just, Laurence, we are just concluding, so sorry. There is not a second.
C'est un rappel au règlement, Président.
A point of order, please, Chair.
Go ahead, this is the reglement. You could say which article of the, please.
Oui. Sur la base de...
Yes, Article 180, a point of order. I have been personally accused of racism by Emma Rafovich. However, my speech was a question brought about by what was said by one of the speakers. They referred to 37.5% foreigners involved in cases of sexual offences, even though there are 13% foreigners in the population. Thank you very much.
So we will see exactly, but as far as we know, that there was not a personal attack. So this article does not correspond. It is a personal statement. I could read the article. Rule 180, members who ask to make a personal statement shall be heard at the end of the discussion of the agenda item, which you have asked for, which has been dealt. So since no personal statement has been done by Emma Rafovich, so I'm sorry, but it does not apply. So thank you again to everybody that has participated, especially to our Assad colleagues for making this joint hearing, especially to the speakers for their invaluable insights and contributions. Their expertise has illustrated the complexity of chemical submission and the challenges in detection, prosecution, as well as the urgent need for stronger victim support and prevention measures. We will start to say that it was a problem of public health, it was a problem of inequality, and obviously there is a very complex forensic health. I will really appreciate it. Yeah. If you want to leave the room, leave it, and then should I, if not, I shut up. Thank you. Okay, so as we say, it's very complex and the challenges both in detection and prosecution, so it is really a very urgent need to stronger victim support and prevention measures. We probably, most of all, agree that no victim it is guilty. I think this is one of the main sentences. And it is very much linked to what we hear during the Pellicott case. That is probably one of the most important or examples. We have that shame should definitely change place. So when using statistics, please use it, all of them. And sometimes it's very good not only to see how much percentage of perpetrators are from what origin or whatever, but also maybe it is also an age issue. There are many things, but what is clear in all statistics is that the sexual aggressor profile, it is male. So to start with, that it doesn't mean that all male are aggressors, but this is also the profile. So this is something probably we really need to take into consideration and to also work against these structural gender inequalities. So we have discussed a lot of knowledge here, but probably it is not enough, and we really need to take action. Lawmakers, authorities, civil society, police, all relevant stakeholders must collaborate closely to gaps in prevention, reporting, and obviously justice. The victim should not feel alone, and she should feel comfortable enough, secure enough to report the crime that we know that it is reported. What the expertise shared today must translate into concrete steps towards a strong coordinated response at both national and European Union level. So thank you all for your participation, and we hope from the SAN committee and the FAN committee we keep collaborating and advancing to prevent and to eliminate all the crimes that are derived from these chemical submissions that, as we have seen, they are done mainly against women and girls. So we really need to protect that, especially to prevent that happening. So 1 minute to our schedule. So thank you very much, and sorry for all the inconvenience we have at the very beginning. Thanks.